everybody. Welcome to Fireside Adoptees. We are holding a special event called Amplifying Advocacy Voices. We're super excited just to be able to introduce people who are really passionate and making a difference in their way for everybody in their specific area. So we are excited. This is our first time doing this specific um, kind of event. So hopefully there'll be more to come. And yeah, and our guests today are Lynelle Long from Intercountry Adoptee Voices. We have Dr. Barbara Sumner, and we also have Andrea Coates. We're super excited, and we'll let I will turn it over to Greg, who's going to give us their bio, and we'll get this party started.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thanks for putting this together. I know that everyone who is involved put a lot of work into this. It's really exciting that we can have this time together here. My name is Greg Gentry. I'm a domestic infant adoptee from the baby scoop era here in the U.S., born in California, and a member of Fireside Adoptees. I'm happy to be part of the event here tonight. So wanted to introduce our three guests. I know Amanda has just identified them for you, but I was going to read to you a little bit about them. So Dr. Barbara Sumner is a writer and adoptee advocate whose work challenges the myths and silences surrounding adoption. Barbara is passionate about advancing adoptee rights, exposing the systemic injustices of adoption law, and reframing adoption as a lifelong condition imposed without consent. Lynelle Long is a Vietnamese adoptee and founder of Intercountry Adoptee Voices, as Amanda mentioned. Her advocacy work includes working with the UN, the Hague Working Group, and the Interparliamentary Task Force on Human Trafficking. And Andrea Coates, LCSW, is a trauma-informed therapist with over 20 years of experience in the behavioral health field. She has worked with children and adolescents in the foster care system, particularly in inpatient and high acuity settings, and brings both professional expertise and personal perspective to her work. So welcome to our guests. We're really excited to have you here and honored. And we will start with Barbara. We look forward to hearing from you, Barbara.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Kia ora from New Zealand. And good to see some of my New Zealand friends here. So I'm a historical fiction author. I'm a memoirist, and I was adopted in 1960, forcibly taken from my mother. And as I like to say, I was adopted into a bare room Anglican home that had none of the culture that I would have had if I'd been able to stay in my own family. I've written something here rather than just talking. I'm much easier on paper than I am in person. So I just want to talk about the fact that I'm a vocal advocate for empowering adopted people through knowledge. That's my very specific area that I focus on. In 1997, 3.2% of the population of New Zealand were adopted. A massive number, one of the highest in the world. And then once you added in adoptive parents and biological parents and extended family, 16% of our country has a direct connection to human adoption. Adoption, as we know, is portrayed everywhere as helping a needy child to experience a loving home. And as a bonus, helping someone resolve their infertility and family building challenges. This win-win story of rescue and advantage is endlessly retold in the media. It's embedded in our legislations, our judicial systems, our families, and our collective social beliefs. It's the dominant narrative of adoption as a social good that often overlooks the complex social, legal, political implications of living as a person taken for the purpose of adoption. So the thing I always like to ask is, what is adoption actually? And once we understand that, it makes us more able to be strong advocates and to really, get involved in conversation with people so that we can advance a very different perspective. So if we're committed to changing things, and I know we all are, I think we have to first understand just precisely what adoption is. In New Zealand, our Law Commission describes adoption as a secret process, elaborate precautions being taken to conceal the fact as well as the identity of the child's natural parents, and presenting the child to the world as in fact and in law born to adoptive parents. I don't think there's a clearer description, and they know, they get it. It's right there in black and white. It's a statutory scheme to change a person's status from illegitimate to legitimate, except that term no longer, illegitimate, no longer exists in any law in just about any country that I'm aware of. And yet the concept of it remains completely embedded in our lives. We are illegitimate in so many ways, in that we are not equal to legitimate people. And that status has empowered the courts and the states in most countries to conceal and terminate a person's identity and allocate a new one without their consent. We can't divorce our adopters, but they can return us, especially when we're under 18. We can't access our records without a massive and often fruitless effort. Many of us can't access the medical histories of our families. We've no right to authentic birth certificates. We must pass on our assigned identity to our descendants. And that for me is a major issue. I have 5 daughters and 6 grandchildren, and all of us sitting on the family tree of people that we have nothing to do with and who will have nothing to do with us. So I find that very painful, and that's something that in my lifetime I want to end. And aside from adoption being a state-supported function of the nuclear family, a single mother did not, back in the baby scoop day, fit that structure of the nuclear family, just as an infertile wife did not fit that structure. So adoption really was a way to uphold the morality of the 50s and 60s. That morality is so long gone, and yet it's still part of the religio-legal ordering code that is part of our society. It was also, as we all understand, a really powerful way to punish mothers for their sexual activity. Importantly, adoption, as we've always practiced it in this modern time, enabled men to remain anonymous and therefore outside any censure for their sexual liaisons, or, lucky for them, any liability for their out-of-wedlock children. And the other upside for men, adoption secured the orderly devolution of property. It protected their legitimate heirs from illegitimate incursion, and it continues to do so. So just one more of the discriminations is around inheritance that we have to live with. To me, all of these things together represent human rights violations, except that all of it is legal. So we can't claim human rights violations or discrimination because it is legal. But then I think slavery was once legal. Discrimination against people for their sexual orientation was once legal. It used to be legal to bar women from voting. It was legal to ban people from public places based on the colour of their skin. We are discriminated against based on the circumstances surrounding our birth or the dysfunction within our families. You may have heard, I think we've all heard the term paper orphan to describe us, but that phrase, like so many others around adoption, manipulates language. An orphan is a child whose parents have died. We are something else entirely. We're a lower class of orphan. We are Phyllis Nullis, Latin for child of no one, a legal fiction that erases our parents as if they never existed, even when they're still alive. I mean, it's absurd, really. However, I have to believe that the state of being owned, which we are, can change. If I don't believe that, then my life is reduced to being a thing, as if I was still a chattel or a stolen good. I think as people who are advocating for change, one of our biggest hurdles is individualism. Adoption is a secret cult. Each of us is siloed within our individual experiences. Our lives are bound by secrecy. Each of us is grappling with our emotional responses to the status imposed on us, but we grapple with it in secret and in private. That's why groups like this are really important. It is inappropriate to treat systemic discrimination as if it was individual. All those once legal and now outlawed forms of discrimination all had one thing in common: collective effort. That's why this matters, because none of us can change it on our own. We can only do it collectively. So how do we all become really strong advocates, activists and advocates for change? I think we do it by stepping up and joining together, as we're doing here, by ignoring the very real divisions within our community of adopted people, by educating ourselves, by reaching out to other adopted people for support, and by joining any organisation in your country that is fighting to bring change. And where you can, providing material support to those organisations. And I want to add, with all those once legal discriminations, once one country recognises that human adoption is a failed social experiment and that all adopted people have the same rights as the non-adopted, other countries will follow. Think of it like this: in tiny, far-flung New Zealand, where I am, we were the first country in the entire world to grant women the right to vote in 1893. While most nations still clung to the belief that politics was a man's domain, this small country lit a fire that could not be extinguished. One by one, other countries followed. This is how we advocate for the rights of all adopted people and bring down the institution for good.
Fantastic. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Wonderful, Barbara. We look forward to engaging more about it in the Q&A and maybe some closing thoughts. Thank you. Very, very stirring, and I see a lot of emotion expressed in the chat here, people, and also just the facial expressions. People are really resonating with what you've said, and I know I am. So thank you very much. Lynelle, looking forward to hearing from you next.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg and Amanda. And I love everything you publish and write, Barbara. I'm one of your huge fans. So it's really nice to hear you in person. So thanks for that. Well, I'm very honoured to be here, and I hope that what I share will be helpful to the wider community. I'd like to speak to you today about my personal journey and how I've learned to turn my pain into something useful for myself via that transformative journey called advocacy. So before I start, I just want to acknowledge that there are many incredible adoptee advocates in the field, and I am no way the only one for intercountry adoptees. I collaborate with many who have done this incredible work over decades, and I want to acknowledge them. I walk beside them and I walk after them. Advocacy and our results is built upon generation of work of many, and it is never the work of just one sole person. So my first question for you to all think about, based on our topic today, is, well, what actually is advocacy? I had to think about this when I was asked to present in the Netherlands a couple of years ago at the ANEO Congress. And by the way, I love our European community of intercountry adoptees over there, because they really are the world leaders on fighting from a rights-based focus for our rights and our needs. And they've done an incredible job there. So I had to look up what the definition of advocacy was, because I couldn't really define it in my own words. And the one definition that most aligns to what I do and what I put my efforts into is this one. So I will talk about it this way. Advocacy is the organised attempt to change policy, practice and attitudes by presenting evidence and arguments for how and why change must occur. It's about amplifying our truths as adoptees and as other members of the constellation, about influencing systems, and about healing through action. So I'm going to talk to you today about how I got involved and some of the key learnings I've gained over the years to share with those of you who are interested in getting involved and considering stepping up. It can be quite daunting to consider, but I hope that what I can share today might encourage you. For those who don't know me, I was born in Vietnam and taken to Australia as an infant by a white Australian family. I'm the only adoptee raised in the middle of 4 biological children of theirs, and I was raised on a dairy farm in regional Australia. I grew up very isolated. Knowing no one else like me was very difficult, and until I moved states at the age of 20, I didn't really meet anyone who was like me. At that time, I struggled deeply, wondering why life felt so hard, why I was lost, why I was struggling, and who I truly was. At one stage while I was studying and working, one of my clients was a woman who attended the 12-step AA-based programs. Hers was actually Overeaters Anonymous. I actually attended as one of her supports, and I've realised the power of these groups. And I became curious if there was an equivalent support group for adoptees and Adoptees Anonymous, but I found nothing. I stumbled across some formal post-adoption services, the one here in New South Wales. I attended one of their group events, but it was mainly for white domestic adoptees. There was no one else in that whole group who looked like me or had the similar kind of experience, a person of colour, being born in another country that I was adopted to. So I asked that centre, were there any others like me? And they said, well, occasionally, yes, but they didn't really know if there was any specific support for us. So I gave them permission to pass on my contact details in case anyone else reached out, and hence began my journey of connecting to other intercountry, mostly transracial adoptees. At that time, I worked in IBM and I had a technology background. I knew the power of the internet and I had my website up and available. And almost immediately, adoptees joined from all around the world: Germany, Netherlands, USA, Canada, Australia. And today, 27 years later, ICAV is one of the oldest and largest global networks for intercountry adoptees, where we provide space to share, connect, collaborate, and advocate. So how did I get involved, and how can you get involved? Some may wonder how I became an advocate. It wasn't planned, let me tell you that. It was a natural progression, and because of my own experience of struggle, pain, and complex trauma, I wanted ultimately to ensure that nobody else suffered in the same way. And unfortunately, after decades of talking to many, I know that we actually still continue to suffer in very much the same ways. So after years of listening to many others and hearing our shared stories, I realised that the systems that create our adoptions are actually replicating the same problems over and over again. And it seems that very few people at that time, way back 27 years ago, were working in the arena to fix them. So over time, I came to understand that there is power in transforming my own pain into a purpose to create much needed change. I didn't need special qualifications to be an advocate. I just needed to start where I was, connecting with others, reclaiming my voice, that was a huge part, and using my strengths to speak about the truth, about what I knew and what I continue to learn about adoption and the systems that uphold it. So in the early days in Australia, this is an example of how I started. I encouraged fellow adoptees to participate in education processes, particularly in the assessment of prospective parents. We shared our lived experiences at these forums to help better educate future parents. This was our way of influencing the next generation of adoptees. It felt rewarding, it felt liberating, and we were being compensated for our expertise and time. And eventually my work evolved, and I couldn't help but get involved at more political forums. Back then in the early 2000s, intercountry adoptee voices were pretty much invisible. And as ICAV grew, I started collecting and publishing our voices. Things like, for example, the perspective papers that I started very early, where I would gather multiple voices on topics like racism, changing our names, searching, returning to birth country. The process of harnessing our voices together en masse became the foundation of how I do my advocacy still today. I continue to centre our collective voices, and especially those most underrepresented and on the topics that nobody wants to hear about. So for me, advocacy has been a very healing journey. Meeting others like me, fellow adoptees and survivors, made me realize I'm not alone. And that realization sparked my transition from being a victim to becoming an advocate. Connecting with people who genuinely are able to validate my pain helped restore my trust in people. And trust is one of those hugest areas that we adoptees are impacted in. And as I learned about the system that creates us, I connected to many professionals who facilitate adoption. I learned about the processes that they follow. I came to understand how and why it's so difficult to dismantle this broken system. Some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, I want to share with you, particularly for those who are thinking about becoming advocates and stepping into the space. Lesson 1, I built a solid, strong base and I formed strong relationships. Advocacy is all about relationships with allies, adoptees, institutions. I've worked for over 20 years now to represent and bring with me a variety of global voices at government, non-government, and spaces that are on the international arena. Gathering your community is so important, not just those who share your experience, but also those who challenge it respectfully. Real advocacy represents the collective with all its diverse views and experiences. I personally take an approach of connecting one-to-one with many adoptees and leaders in my network. That's taken years, and it helps to build trust and understanding, especially in times of conflict. Don't forget to find allies and collaborators, even those who are not part of the triad. There are many who want to support our community, and respectful collaboration is key. Lesson number 2 is to learn and understand the systems and have a strategy. And when I talk about systems, I mean the international frameworks, such as the Hague Convention, what is it for intercountry adoption, the UNCRC, the Enforced Disappearances Convention, the national laws of each of your countries, the key influences. Keep up to date with what's happening on a debate, research and reform perspective. And you'll see if you follow my Intercountry Adoptee News web page and on my LinkedIn, I attempt to keep people up to date and informed all the time with the latest on debate, research, news and perspectives. Advocate with integrity by challenging the systems, not the people. And this is a huge one that I've learned is if you want to be successful in this space, don't attack the people, attack the systems. This means be respectful, be factual, be solution focused while maintaining a professional tone, even when you're emotionally impacted or it's an emotionally impactful topic. It's really important to learn when to speak up and when to listen. And it's really important to understand the levers of power, understand who makes the decisions or where they're made and how they're influenced, and try to find ways to get involved in there. Look for windows of opportunity, elections, reviews, reform proposals. And strategy does matter. So build your allies and build a team around you of people who can guide you if you don't know what to do. Lesson number 3, this is a huge one. Expect internal and external conflict. In the adoptee space, the bedrock of our shared experience, unfortunately, is trauma. It impacts everyone. And I've learned a new word lately because I used to describe this but didn't have the term. It's called lateral violence. And that's in these adoptee spaces of any groups with victims and survivors, we can turn on our own selves and we can fight internally. And this has probably been one of the hardest areas that I've had to deal with over many years. How to navigate that, how to survive it, how to be strong, how to stay connected to your own self and not be lost. So choose respectful dialogue over public takedowns. That is, learn to disagree respectfully. Know when to walk away or agree to disagree. Change needs many voices, not just one voice fighting everybody else. There's a lot of room in this space for all of us to have our different methods, our different approaches, and our different voices. And I just want to make sure that we are not naive to the costs of advocacy. So lesson number 4 is about understanding that being an advocate, sorry. Lesson number 4 is about saying that being an advocate comes at a price personally. I expose myself all the time. I get judged. I get publicly attacked. I get targeted by my critics. Be mindful that not everyone in the advocacy space is healed or self-aware. It's also very frustrating too, because the pace of change is always very, very slow. We are talking about dismantling a system that's been around in intercountry adoption spaces for 70 years, more for domestic spaces, and patience is definitely a virtue. Also, listening to countless painful stories from many survivors and victims can cause us vicarious trauma. That's why I stress the importance of self-care. Having mentors, professional supports, and passions outside of adoption are vital. For me, sport, a range of hobbies, my family life, they're very grounding. They offer me a space away from advocacy and helps me to restore balance. The burden of educating others, like what Barbara's doing, is very real. Just remember, you don't have to take on this burden. Only do it if it nourishes you. We do have to look after ourselves first, and you can't pour from an empty cup if you want to be in it for the long haul. So set firm boundaries, take breaks, and nurture your key relationships. This cause is important, but it's not your only responsibility. And lastly, meaningful advocacy grows with time, reflection, and humility. Advocacy is not just about speaking out, it's largely about transforming ourselves from within, but it's also about dealing with the systems and the processes that create and impact us from the outside. We become advocates because this is our life, our experience, and our communities matter. Together, we try to heal, grow, and we'd like to create the world that we wished we'd inherited. We carry not just our own pain, but the power to change what caused it. I invite each of you, wherever you are on your journey, to be part of that journey. Thank you very much for having me here
Great,
today.
Lynelle. Thank you so much for outlining in such a clear way what you found so important for elements of advocacy and just aiding tremendously in a conversation like this. Really, really appreciate that input as well. And we've talked about the role of allyship a little bit. And so this is why it's important for our next speaker, Andrea Coates, who is an adoptee ally. And as I think people understand, allies are people that the community identifies as allies. So if somebody doesn't identify themselves to be an ally, that it's kind of something they earn. And Andrea has earned that distinction. And looking forward to hearing from her as a non-adoptee, as a non-adopted person, but a staunch adoptee ally and somebody with wide experience with trauma-informed therapy. And we'll look forward to hearing a little bit about her story and how she intersects with our community and the importance of allyship as another dimension of advocacy. So Andrea, I want to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and share that now. Okay, so I was asked to speak about the foster care system and about advocacy within foster care, just due to my own kind of personal experience with the foster care system, not as a person in the foster care system, but I'll talk more about that. And then also in helping in my professional experience with the children and adolescents who are in the foster care system. And then also how that intersects with my advocacy work in the adoption space as well. And so this presentation will critically examine failures within the U.S. foster care system affecting vulnerable children. And I'll discuss the foster care system's breakdown, which profoundly impacts children's lives and well-being across the United States. And I will also discuss the need for reform and urgent advocacy. I am a search angel. I've been a search angel for about 15 years. My best friend is adopted, and one day told me at a baseball game that both of our children were playing in, that she didn't have, that her birth certificate basically was falsified. And I was completely astounded and didn't even know what to do with that information. And we forged a friendship, a very deep friendship. And she asked if I asked if I could ask more questions about her adoption. And she shared with me all kinds of information. And I've always been a very curious person, a researcher just by nature. And so I asked her if I could help her with her search. And we met one day at a coffee shop, and she handed me her file folder of information. And it was not lost on me that day that she was giving me everything she knew about herself, which was very little. And that is what started my journey into this community. And so I am a search angel. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and I am proud to be considered by many of my friends within the community an adoptee ally. I am also the daughter of a former foster youth who became pregnant with me while she was in foster care as her only way to escape a system that had already failed her. My mother's childhood began with joy and stability in Astoria, Oregon. She played softball, took dance lessons, and was even crowned a regatta princess. But by age 14, everything had changed. Her mother died suddenly, her brother was drafted into the Vietnam War, and her father, who was grieving and overwhelmed, died by suicide. So, left without family nearby, she entered foster care, where her life was marked by instability and harm. At age 16, she sought a way out. She believed that by having a baby, she would no longer be a ward of the court. Instead, she found herself in another unsafe situation with my biological father, who was a gang member at the time. And she ended up enduring domestic violence while raising eventually 2 children. Her determination never wavered. When I was 8 and my brother was 6, thankfully, she found the courage to leave and begin again. So growing up, I often heard my mother's stories. She spoke of the losses, the severe abuse, and the ways that the system stripped her of her identity, even forcing her to use a different name at one point. I witnessed the impact of her trauma in the form of flashbacks and painful memories. And her story was not just her past, it shaped my childhood too. I wish I could say today that foster care has changed, that children are no longer exposed to the kinds of harm my mother endured in the 1960s. But the truth is that many of the same systemic failures remain. Children still fall through the cracks, families are still broken apart, and survivors like my mother, who has passed away, remind us that we have so much more work to do. As of September 2023, there were 343,077 children in foster care in the United States, with over 525 children having entered or exited the system throughout the year. The average duration of stay in the foster care is often more than 18 months, indicating prolonged exposure to systemic conditions. These statistics, sourced from USA Facts and OAI Cares, illustrate the vast scale and reach of the foster care system, highlighting the significant number of children affected annually and the extended time span that many of them spend in care. Children in the foster care system face a significantly higher risk of mortality compared to the general child population. According to JAMA Pediatrics 2020, the mortality rate in foster care is 35.4 deaths per 100,000 person years, compared to 25 deaths per 100,000 in the general population, which is a 42% increased risk. For children aged 1 to 4, the disparity is even more pronounced, with rates of 50.7 per 100,000 in foster care versus 27.5 in the general population. These figures underscore the urgent need for systemic reform to protect the lives of children in care. Abuse within the foster care system remains a pervasive issue, exacerbated by inadequate oversight. States frequently fail to track incidents of abuse in foster facilities, as reported by U.S. News in 2024. Abuse by both foster parents and peers continues to be reported nationwide. A notable example is the Mentor Network, which is a large for-profit provider where 86 children died over a 10-year span. These failures highlight the lack of accountability and the dire consequence of insufficient monitoring and regulation. Several systemic issues contribute to the failures of the foster care system. These include a lack of consistent oversight and reporting, understaffing, and high caseloads that hinder caseworker effectiveness. The privatization of foster care services and the prevalence for-profit facilities creates gaps in accountability. Additionally, prevention efforts are underfunded, leading to unnecessary removals that could be avoided with early family support. These structural problems undermine the system's ability to safeguard children and necessitate comprehensive reform. Children in foster care often experience severe psychological and emotional consequences, including trauma, PTSD, and attachment disorders. Many age out of the system without permanent family connections, increasing the risk of homelessness, incarceration, and mental health crises. The elevated mortality rate is the most extreme outcome, as documented and already discussed by JAMA. These long-term impacts reflect the system's failure to provide stable, nurturing environments and highlight the need for targeted interventions to support affected youth. Effective advocacy and reform strategies include mandatory public reporting of abuse and deaths to ensure transparency. Strengthening oversight of foster parents and facilities is crucial for accountability. Funding preventative services can help keep families intact when safe, reducing unnecessary placements. Providing comprehensive training and support for foster parents enhances care quality. Prioritizing permanency through reunification or guardianship over long-term institutional care can improve outcomes for children. And these solutions aim to address systemic flaws and promote a more protective and supportive foster care environment. What I do want to talk about regarding the last portion of the advocacy solutions is adoption as it intersects with foster care. The fact is that between 45 and 50 or 55 couples there are 45 to 55 couples per every newborn baby in this country waiting to adopt a newborn baby in this country. And because of that, people are looking to foster care for their adoptions. And foster care very much sometimes turns into adoptions, which means that when these children are adopted through foster care, their records are sealed too. Their OBCs are sealed too once that happens. And I just wanted to take a minute for anyone who doesn't know about the dual birth certificate system in the United States. When a child is born, a birth certificate is issued, and the actual people who parented the child, most of the time in the case of adoption, of newborn domestic adoption, we see the mother's name on there. Sometimes, in rare circumstances, the mother and father, the biological mother and father, are listed on that original birth certificate. However, when a child is adopted, an amended birth certificate, absolutely 100% falsified, is issued, and the original one is sealed. So currently, 16 states are open with no restrictions. 19 are open with restrictions. And let's see. And 15 states plus the District of Columbia are closed. I like to use adopteerightslaw.com. This is Greg Luce's site, and I will be glad to put this link in the chat when I'm finished with this. But I highly recommend this site for up-to-date information on the status of the OBC laws in the states. Here are the closed states: California, Florida, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, South Carolina, Utah, Virginia, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and the District of Columbia. So how can you be an advocate? How can I be an advocate? Well, first, when it comes to foster care, be aware. Be aware of what's going on with the children around you. When I've learned about the deaths of the children in foster care, these were kids who were oftentimes bruised and battered. They went to school, they talked about what was going on, they asked for help. So be aware. If you're a mandated reporter, which in some states, we all are mandated reporters, but teachers, medical professionals, usually people with licenses, are definitely mandated reporters. But if you see something, say something. This is an easy way to help keep children safe. But we do know that in so many cases where these children died, there were signs, there were things that were seen later as odd. And so be aware. You can become a court-appointed special advocate. This is like a guardian ad litem system. You can volunteer to mentor a person in the foster care system. You can support organizations and established efforts for OBC change. You can join others in family preservation initiatives. Family preservation and prevention before a placement is even needed is really key here. So family preservation and prevention, wraparound services, services where therapists can come into the home and really just care for these families that don't need to be separated most of the time or a lot of the time. And of course, we all want children to be in safe places. Of course we do. But there are so many other things that can happen first. So family preservation and preventative measures are so important. So anytime you have a chance to get involved with that, if that's something that's that you have the opportunity to do, that's something that you can do to really affect change. And like Lynelle said about educate yourself about the laws, about foster care laws, OBC laws, adoption laws. It's very frustrating that in the United States, all of these laws are different for every state. Going back to resources are different in every state. Resources could be different in every county of every state. And so we really need to be aware of what's available, what our laws are. It's really one way to be a good advocate. Leverage your influence professionally, personally, whenever you have the opportunity to talk about these issues and issues that are important to you that affect children, foster care children, adopted children. Leverage your influence. When I work for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, and when I was a behavioral health case manager for a state employee plan, I noticed that adopted children were overrepresented in our high acuity facilities, and I noticed that we weren't finding out about them until their second or third hospitalization. And so I worked with my medical director and I worked with the people at the state plan, and we developed basically a mailing that went out to people that said, if you have an adopted child or if you are thinking about adopting, please reach out to us as soon as that happens. We want to connect you with services. We basically made an early intervention kind of program. Would I prefer that we not have to deal with this at all? Yes. The fact of the matter is children are being adopted, and what do we do with that to ensure that they're getting the help they need right away, and that we're not waiting until they're 13 and 14 and experiencing distress and identity crises and needing hospitalizations. We want to really provide support and really more than encourage parents to really get trauma-informed care for these children way before they need it. One lesson that I learned at the very beginning of my journey into this community was that I needed to listen and learn. I just needed to be quiet, and I needed to listen and learn. I'm still doing that. I think it's imperative for allies, especially, to listen and learn. And also, I think that we need to help others, especially our younger generation, become genealogically aware. I have 3 children, and they were between the ages of 6 and 13 when I started doing search angel work. And they knew that when they heard me say, "I found her," from my office, that they knew I found somebody's birth mother. And all 3 of them were as excited, or in their own ways, excited as I was. I was very open in age-appropriate ways about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And my 3 children are genealogically aware. And I think that we need to give that information to people younger than us, so that they have this information, so that they are aware, so that it affects their decisions, and that they can help others, knowing that genetic mirroring is important, that maternal infant separation is tragic and should not happen. And also, I want to say that when I first started doing search angel work for my best friend, it was 7 years before we got a good match, because I started probably 2 years before DNA was available. And the first kits became available with 23andMe, and we just waited and waited, and she got on Ancestry, and we waited and waited. But in that time, I decided that I needed to learn. I read books, I read The Girls Who Went Away, I listened to podcasts, story after story after story. And so I want to say to those of you on this call who are adopted or who are former foster youth, keep telling your story, because advocates or potential advocates, potential allies, people who want to get involved but don't know exactly how, we learn from you. And this is, telling your story is how we learn. And then also, we need to educate others, just like I was talking about, becoming, helping others become genealogically aware that this is not rainbows, and this is not family building, that this is trauma, that this is real trauma. So in conclusion, the foster care system was designed to protect vulnerable children. It often inflicts harm due to systemic failures. With accountability, prevention, and true support, I think change is possible. We need urgent reform, transparency, and investment in preventative measures. And like Lynelle, I'm going to encourage you to take care of yourselves in this process. The stories in foster care are horrendous. Listening to adoptee stories and the tragedy of separation and loss and trauma, it's hard. However, in order to learn, we need to listen, and we need to subject ourselves to hard things in order to receive our motivation to keep going. At the same time, vicarious trauma, like Lynelle said, is real. And so we need to honor our bodies and hold space for our feelings. We need to know our triggers. And so we need to be aware of that. We need to take breaks when needed. And we need to be kind to each other and kind to ourselves in this work.
Andrea,
Thank you.
yet another very important dimension to all of this, one we don't hear about often enough. And I feel more educated listening to you provide some of these statistics and insights. And of course, you know, how much I appreciate your work as an ally. And I think that you're always somebody who, every time we've had a conversation about topics like this, has centered adoptees, made sure that the adoptee voice was centered, which means so much to us as marginalized people who haven't had a seat at the table, and in a lot of ways still don't. But the fact that you are such a good listener to us, and how tirelessly you are such a good listener to us, has been a lot for me. And I know, knowing the people that you've worked with, that it's so important that we have allies and advocates rounded out by the addition of allies. And we know, unfortunately, that as adoptees, that our voices are not necessarily the ones that people are likely to believe. And it's terrible. It's unjust. We're working to, people like Barbara and Lynelle are working very hard to shift that narrative so that we are heard as the credible people that we are, who are looking for this deep change and demanding something be done. But we need your voice too, and the voice of allies. So thank you for that. And Amanda, we're right at the top of the hour. I think if you have a couple comments before we go into the Q&A, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm just so humbled by the presentations given, and Andrea, Lynelle, Barbara, like all of us here, right? We're all, even just being here, I feel like is advocacy work. If nothing else, we're advocating for ourselves to know, like, hey, there is a problem. And I say that because sometimes it's easy to be like, well, am I the problem? Maybe I'm just fill in the blank. It's like, no, there is work to be done, right? And that's okay. And not okay that like in a perfect world these things wouldn't happen, but the fact that we're here, I'm so glad that we're able to come together. And like Lynelle said, like, yeah, we all come at it from different ways, different angles, different points of view. We don't have to be a cult. We don't have to all think the same in order to advocate, right? I can have my way, and Lynelle has her way, and Barbara and Andrea, everybody, right? We don't have to have a stranglehold on how to behave. And I think that's the beautiful thing, because how I advocate, how Lynelle, Barbara, anybody in here, Phil, Laura, we all reach different people, right? And that's the amazing part. So if you ever think, well, maybe I'm not that, I don't have that personality, but you just might for that right person. And that's the thing I've in my advocacy work, that's the one thing I've learned. The more I am me, the more somebody can really hear what I'm saying versus if I'm trying to emulate somebody. So that's the only advice I have, is the closer we are to ourselves, the really better we are to reach out to people, because they can hear us, they can see our sincerity, like, hey, I mean you no harm, and I would love to share you a broader vision of this so you can see, or help see. But I'm excited for the Q&A. Like, basically the Q&A part of this is where anybody in the audience, feel free to ask, Barbara, Lynelle, excuse me, Andrea, anybody, or if you just have a question for all, all the hosts, speakers, That'd be great too. It's just really, while we're here, just conversation. So,
Perfect. Yeah, I think everybody who's been on Zoom will know about the reactions button that you have. At least they used to have at the bottom. I know they keep changing this, but the reactions is that little heart at the bottom here. It allows you within there to raise your hand like you're about to see me do here. And then when you're called on, just invite you to unmute. I've just given everybody the ability to unmute. And we'd love to have you address any of our speakers. We'll go with 3 minutes. We will instill a timer here, and that's again to keep things on track and to make sure it's equitable in terms of the amount of time people get. Not because we don't want to hear the full question somebody has, but that we found is really good for keeping things moving along. So if you see the timer, it's not meant to stress you out or have you feel singled out. It's just a way of keeping this going. There's Amanda. Now you're still muted though. Oh, I can run the timer if that's what you're looking for. Okay. But you can unmute yourself too, right? You still have the ability to. Okay.
yeah, I was just trying to
All right.
find, I'd
I
actually
did find
minimized
it. So,
everything.
yeah. This is how Amanda and I work. It's fun. It's chaotic. It's good. All right. So invite anybody who has a question for one of our guests. Please raise your hand, and we'll also kind of scan in case somebody's having trouble raising your hand with the Zoom application. We like to kind of see if we notice anybody with a visual hand up like this. We'll be looking for that too. Mark, yes, please go ahead. It's like you're on mute.
There we
There
go.
you go.
Hi, it's really wonderful to be with everybody tonight. I'm in Owensboro, Kentucky tonight. Frank there is actually Francine, and she and I have been working together in the Episcopal Church uh, on the subject of forced adoption. So the Episcopal Church has actually gotten to the point where it has agreed that it has participated in forced adoptions. In 2022, at its General Convention, it affirmed that fact. And it allegedly created a group, a working group within the church, to learn more about it and examine what it had done. Now, the truth is, in the last 3 years, nada, zero has actually happened. And Francine and I are both really pissed off. Now, I was thinking of what Lynelle said about, okay, things that affect you personally, you're going to have emotions. And yeah, I'm upset that nothing has happened in the last 3 years. We've communicated with different people about it, but no motion seems to happen. And, it's a big institution. So it's got this hierarchy of who you talk to and how you can communicate. And because the head office is in New York City, but people are also distributed around God knows where, it's really difficult to communicate. And so, one thing I've kind of dreamed about is trying to apply external pressure from other people involved in this constellation. Let the Episcopal Church know from outside that people are concerned about this. And maybe they'd hear other voices that aren't Francine's and mine talk. Okay, that's just sort of a fantasy. I don't know anything about that. I've talked to different groups, adoptee groups, and really have not gotten any, interest. There's been no expression, there's been no response that I've gotten to that idea. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there. trying to be emotionally okay, step by step. What's the strategy? What kind of strategy, can we think of? There we go. It's out there.
Thanks for both you and Francine to be here, first of all, and to listen, and can tell that you're passionate about this. So I saw the question from her in the chat about suggestions from the group. So anybody who has a contribution to the chat that you might make as a suggestion, I'm sure that would be very welcome. Let's see, build a wider alliance to harness voices and support base put forward reasons why response. Read the rest of that if I could here, 1 second. My responses for victims are needed. Use media wisely.
Do you want me to extrapolate on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mark, great work. But I know how painfully slow a lot of this is. So this is where I talk about, make sure there's more than just the impacted victims who are speaking up. First of all, you've got to have that. You've got to have their voices, and you've got to show the impacts and demonstrate that in some kind of formal way. As well as build that wider alliance so that you have other support base that can also pitch in from an academic point of view. It's usually very helpful. And from the mental health perspective, their voices. So often I find that the academics and the mental health professionals are two of our biggest supporters to help as allies to bring in, the reasoning as to why victims should be responded to and what that should look like. One of the things I did for our work on illegal adoptions was to bring our voices together to say, what solutions does the community want, and spell it out. That's actually what we did and what we presented to The Hague and to the United Nations as victims of illegal adoption. So you've got to go with some solutions of what you want it to look like. So the problem for these institutions is they may not know what to do. Like, yes, they've acknowledged there's a problem, but what does it mean to respond to the problem, and what should it look like in actual steps and concrete actions? So you, as victims, it's very helpful to spell that out. So you can leverage off some of the work that we've done, because I'm sure a lot of those, the responses that victims in inter-country adoption want is often, almost similar to what the domestic impacted people want. But you must also have other pieces as well. And there must also be legislative, very specific changes that you also want to support things, such as supports to reunify your families, such as DNA testing, very concrete actions. That's my suggestion to you.
I love those suggestions, Lynelle. It's like I like the idea of like go in with what does this look like? What does this help look like? And it gets I would think it would help people get more cerebral, right? You're not attacking, you're coming with like, hey, have you considered the following? These are things we need. Birth records, right? Things like that. And I love that answer.
I just want to mention too that a lot of these institutions have never done something like this before. So that's why it's really important that victims and survivors actually collate a list of what you want, because they're having to invent something from scratch and they don't necessarily know whether it's aligned to what the victims even want. So especially in America, where you've never had even a domestic adoption inquiry or a reckoning or a truth investigation, whereas some of our other countries have had that base work's been done. So you already have like some templates of what support and responses should look like. Yeah.
Really helpful. Thank you so much for such an informed answer, Lynelle. I hope that was helpful, Mark and Francine. Barb, would you like to ask a question to one of our speakers?
But I like the presentations. They're very informative and articulate. As an older adult adoptee, I'd say somewhere where we are now, because I was a early discovery adoptee and found my biological family when I was 25, and I'm in my 60s now. So when I tell people that I'm adopted or they find out I'm adopted, my next sentence is, but I've known where my biological family is for years, because it changes how I get treated, even now. So the advocacy that I put forth um, is being an example. And I used to hate, I mean, I used to hate just being adopted, when I was growing up and stuff too, but I don't hate it so much more since you know, I've had a lot of therapy, but I have integrated kind of both of the worlds, that I can see the people who have never been adopted's world and the adoptees world. Um, so it's not so much a question. I was born in Washington D.C., but at the time they have closed files. I didn't even think about looking for a birth certificate, and I found information through the unwed mother's home that I just followed and found my birth family. But like I say, decades later, um, I'm much more comfortable being adopted, and I share with friends and anybody else who finds out um, that I have, that even though I'm adopted, I know where my family is, basically. And it's a little defensive, I suppose, but it puts me in a different place. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing, Barb. It's good to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone else like to ask a question to Barbara or Lynelle or Andrea? And the chat is really providing a lot of valuable information. Thanks, Lynelle, for continuing on that. Jude.
Hey, I just want to say how I'm going to lower my own hand. I just want to say how much I appreciate each one of you who came and shared. I'm going to share back a favorite quote from each of you, and then I'm going to ask my question. Barbara, I got chills when you said not equal to legitimate. Like, it hit me so deep. Lynelle, the system that creates us. And Andrea, hold on, I turned the page. You said two things. Maternal fetal separation is tragic, and this is not family building. This is trauma. Thank you for those quotes, each one of you. So I think each of you hit on that this is a systemic issue. And so, I mean, that's big. And I think it feels bigger than any one of us, obviously. And I think that's why it can be so overwhelming. And then I think as individuals, the type of advocacy or change we'd like to see may be different, right? And then even within adoption, you have some that are like, abolish it. And then other, so there's a whole spectrum of what we would like to see. And I guess my question is about the systemic piece, because that's so big. Does anyone have any advice of like, where would we begin? Is it in gathering more voices together? Is it in trying to get these voices together and then messaging legislators? I know each of you have done different types of work, but I'm curious with that bigger systemic piece, like how do we take, even if it's little bites, what are those first bites that we take out of that big elephant? Thank you.
Very nice question. Why don't we start in the order of our guests? If Barbara, if you'd like to contribute to that or comment on that, that would be great.
I think it's something that others have touched on today, is that respond is being vocal but not emotional. And for me, it was about, I was nothing but a bundle of reactive emotion until I was about 55 and got some good therapy and then wrote my memoir. And that saved me, I guess, because I was able to put the emotion into some factual environments. And then that led to me doing the PhD, which is supposedly in creative nonfiction, but actually is in adoption systems, because we have no place to study adoption in New Zealand. So I just sort of subverted one system to meet my own needs. But we have to join together. We can't do it on our own. And I'm about to set up a charity, an organization to start to lobby. We are 70 years in New Zealand also with One Adoption Act and no change. We're all still completely controlled by that 70-year-old piece of legislation. We have, Mark was talking about the church. I mean, part of my research has focused on the Salvation Army in New Zealand. And, you know, if I use their figures, of the 100,000 children taken, 32,000 of them were from the Salvation Army. They were very committed to removing children from their mothers and abusing the mothers, terrible abuse. Now, they have been called to account for their abuse of children in their family homes as part of a Royal Commission. But an adoption was part of that Royal Commission, but they were not called to account for the maternity homes. And they said they didn't believe they had any need to. So for me, it's digging into that kind of thing and getting collective. And I'm wanting to get a lot of people who were taken from that the Salvation Army took. I want them to get involved. And so I'm putting together a foundation that will do that. That will be a central point for that, because there really is no organised activism in this country, not like in Australia, where Lynelle and others have really pioneered it for quite a long time. We are way behind.
Thank you. Let's have Lynelle, if you'd like to answer the question as well.
Yeah, it's a hard one because it depends on where you're at with things as an adoptee and as an advocate. Because for me, first step towards an advocate, other than and I'll answer what's the first step towards systemic change, because that's a bit different. So the first step towards being an advocate, I believe, is really about doing your own personal work as an adoptee. I have often talked to many adoptees around the world who ask me, you know, how do you get involved? What can I do? And I always say the same answer. You've got to work on your own journey first, because it starts with yourself. And once you understand and have the words, the language to even articulate your own story and journey, it is then much easier to understand other people's and to start to then see the systemic patterns and threads that unite us all. So it starts with that individual journey. Like, I don't believe anyone can really step effectively into advocacy if they haven't done their personal journey first. The second answer I'd like to add to that is more about, and it's more geared for those who have done that personal journey, where what is the first step towards systemic change? That is more for those who are seasoned and have been around for a while, where you're really learning how to leverage the levers to get change. And I've seen that from country to country now in the intercountry adoption space, and that is about the mass movement of individuals who get together to create a momentum to push their country or government to acknowledge and investigate. That's a huge piece that I still see lacking in the United States. Like, we have not seen, you know, the first mothers and the adoptees really work together to push hard for change in legislation, or for historic review, or a historic, you know, take of what's actually happened here en masse and what do we need to do about it as recommendations. Like, that hasn't happened in the United States, and I think that that's why the United States is so far behind as an adoptee rights perspective, whereas in Europe, they've really led the way and they've demonstrated that for years now, about how to push for that and how to bring all those voices together. So to get systemic change is a lot harder, because it takes an en masse community to really bring that about, because these structures are so deeply embedded in every part of our legislation in particular. And because the legislation is so hard to change, legislation is the hardest part. So I always say to people, look for your low-hanging fruit. That is, look for the ways of change that you can achieve quicker first, so that you start to build up some feelings of success. And one area that always unites us, whether we're anti, pro, or anywhere in between on the spectrum of adoption belief systems, philosophy, is usually around the post-adoption support. Everyone can get behind the need for better and funded, properly trauma-informed post-adoption support. So build your base of network with that to push for something that everybody can agree on. Don't fight illegal adoptions first, because that's like, man, that's like Ben-Hur of the mountains. Push for your low-hanging fruit that you can get quick wins on, or quicker wins, and I'm talking in the span of decades. And that will usually, you know, give you greater success and targeted systemic change piece by piece, where it's something that's achievable. Hopefully that makes sense.
I love that answer, Lynelle. Like,
Oh.
I have no words, because at least in America, because I'm an intercountry adoptee, Mexico to America, like, just being in this space, there is so much infighting with adoptee groups. Like, everybody wants to be their own special whatever, versus let's just band together on one issue. And because, you know, and that's at least for me, that's been the hardest thing I come against. So thank you. Yeah, low hanging fruit. I love that, because I I'm without words. I just really like that answer. Thank you, Lynelle.
Thanks, Lynelle. Andrea, would you like to address the question?
Sure. So for me, coming in as a non-adoptee, actually a person not of any part of the triad, I again, I had to educate myself. I had to listen and learn. I really say that I just put my head down. I put my head down and listened and learned, and I offered help. So while we were waiting for matches for my best friend search, I became a search angel with the Search Squad on Facebook, which was a system of being vetted. So I didn't just call myself a search angel and ask people to give me their information, right? I knew I had to earn trust. And so I was vetted, and I volunteered. So I had something to offer, and I built relationships. I believe it was Lynelle who said, you know, build relationships. And so I built relationships with people. And then from there, I've been given opportunities. So at the beginning of August, I was able to join the Adoption Rights Coalition in Boston for the National Conference of State Legislators. I was able to talk to senators and congressmen about original birth certificates, and had very hard conversations with them, especially the ones who dared to come up to me and were from a closed state. We had we had a hard conversation, and so we I took that time to educate, and this has been a good 13 years in the making, being able to get to that point. I've been asked to help with another state to actually get to help with the process of possibly working on just the beginnings of getting a closed state opened. So I think, building relationships, building trust, educating ourselves, and taking advantage of opportunities that we're given. I think that's how I kind of entered advocacy work in this space.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. That was a great question, Jude. Got a lot of this content in the chat it's on fire here. It's really good, really thoughtful, and people are engaged here. We love that, right? That's I think what anybody, including our wonderful founder of Fireside, Amanda, would hope for, is engagement like this. For putting on an event like this that she and Jude and the speakers put together, would be engagement. What do we do? What can we do to make a difference? Donna, it's good to see you. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm not going to put my camera on because it's very dark and you wouldn't see me. Oh my goodness, I was late. I've had to, busy time. I came in and Andrea just started talking, and Andrea, I just want to say to you that yes, I'm an adoptee, but I really felt you and your story. So I was relinquished at 3 months. My birth mother, I do believe, because I'm more spiritual now than ever before, and I have forgiveness and let a lot of stuff go, that she actually cared for me in those 3 months. And by divine grace, who knows, but my adoptive parents, whilst being a transracial adoptee in a white family, they are still 90 and 87, still the most wonderful couple I could have ever have landed with. And I have no doubts that I would have been adopted anyway, because of the coercion that my birth mother faced in the UK, having a mixed race baby, a white lady. So her whole story, she ended up trying to take her life. I found out from her brother 3 months after probably not long after our relinquishment. And then when I did go and find her, and my mom, bless her, tried to help me get a picture, I have found out that she had took her life 12 years later. But also, Andrea, I wanted to speak to you because my mom and dad were foster carers. And whilst I was adopted, they fostered so many children. And I consider them, albeit in their 40s, 30s, my brothers and sisters. And they did it. I see so much in the UK and America now, because I've moved. I got out after the 2020 business. I got out and I've moved to the Caribbean with my family and son, and managed to survive this adoption trauma that's come up, but become very aware of how I've witnessed how it can work. And I'm also witnessing more and more recently, which is so sad, how it's really damaging our children. So I feel I'm on my way out. Barbara, I just heard you oh no, Lynelle, I completely agree. All of my people that are coming, souls that are coming my way, they're coming my way almost the day after I've healed myself, my nervous system, and then suddenly people were there that I could help. So I absolutely know that my advocacy is there, but the healing of self is there. But the awareness of this whole fostering and adoption racket is becoming more and more. So thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Lynelle. And thank you, Barbara. I've missed most of you, but I've got so much already. So I really am thankful for this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Donna. Always great to hear from you. Gonda, please go. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for this forum. I appreciate it a lot. And I want to pick up on a few points. I agree on the subject of knowing what your goals are. The oldest adoptee from Greece, which is the area I have been studying, is 78 years old. So what we want as a group of adoptees from Greece is very different because a whole lot of them are simply not alive anymore. We are literally rushing against time to get something done for those who are still alive. What we've recently accomplished, which is a huge big deal, and took years to accomplish, is that they can get their Greek citizenship restored with full support of the Greek government. I can't tell you what it took, but I've written it up. If anybody is interested, find me and I've written it up because it's. But writing, and this is my second point, and I write as an academic. Writing is a huge part of it, and I don't mean just blog posts. I don't mean Facebook posts. I mean peer-reviewed, hardcore, footnoted, annotated, you name it, kind of academic writing. And it is the kind of, and I'm not saying it's superior, absolutely not. But when you feel that you're not treated with credibility, this is not a problem that academics have. So if you can get that academic on your side who has passed the peer review and whatever, and has the doctor or professor in front of her name, you need to find that person to stand by you to help and get them passionate about it, because it makes a huge, big difference. I know it shouldn't operate that way, but it actually does. And so it hasn't come up perhaps often enough in this conversation, but as the Romans already said, you publish or you perish. And it is part of what we should all be doing. And then I also want to pick up on the topic of going into it united. I've tried that long and hard. I would not put the emphasis on go forward with the partners you can work harmoniously with, who are not in it for anything else than getting the goal accomplished, for no self-aggrandizing purposes, not for the drama, not for the movie deal, not for the fun, the money that comes of it. Choose your partners wisely. Don't put the goal of being united over the goal of prevent yourself a whole lot of pain by choosing the right partners and occasionally leaving one behind who is still too deep in goals that do not further the cause. And I think that's a very hard decision. It cost me a lot, but it's the only way that leads to the final end post. So sorry to be a bit of a party pooper on that topic, but I wish I'd known it when I first went in. I could have saved myself a lot of grief. Thank you.
Very wise words, and certainly, Gonda, you're somebody that we're so familiar with, and the work.
And to be told,
yeah, go ahead, please.
To be totally clear with you, I am nowhere on the adoption trial. So I just want you to know that.
Yes, and still a name known to some of us, and appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. And what you've said about peer-reviewed literature, for example, studies and academic studies, for example, and the support that they can garner.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, I feel that, and I know that, and I know that's even difficult, even at the adoptee memoir level. I know a lot of people find trouble with publishers, for example. But in terms of academics, I know that the academics are out there, at least some. I know some of the American academics, and I certainly hope that more and more people with the credentials and who've done the research will be out there putting out noteworthy publications for the strength of the cause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Amanda, what would you like to do at the time? We're at about 8:35, so about an hour and a half into this. What a great conversation. I know I published it was an hour and a half, but I'd like to hear from you what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I would say just give one more moment for anybody who has a question. We are planning to hold an event for Adoptee Remembrance Day, and we'll post more information on that. But yeah, if anybody has a question, please, for our speakers, just please raise your hand right now, because we're about to wrap it up, just to respect everybody's time.
Did want to note what Aaron said.
Yeah.
The healthcare system typically treats us as if we weren't adversely affected by our situation. It sure does.
So true. It's like you have to keep saying, I'm adopted. Does anything run in the family? Well, yeah, that is
Yeah,
hard.
in so many ways.
If the speakers wouldn't mind, maybe a 1 or 2 minute just what you would love people to take away from what you've learned in your journey as an advocate. That would be a wonderful way to wrap it up and honor you, and also the work that you're involved in. If you want to go ahead and let people know, and we will make sure to include that in our emails as well, so how people can reach out to you and your advocacy work.
The 28th of September is World Right to Know Day. And in New Zealand, the Governor General, the Attorney General, whatever, the Ombudsman are joining together to let people know about the records and information government holds on them and an individual's right to access that information. It's a worldwide movement. It's in America. It's, pretty much everywhere. I don't know how it works in other countries, but here, all that wonderful information that's available is not available for adopted people. So we sit as a separate alternative class of persons to whom, as one judge said, records are denied. So, but it's very hard. I've been pitching newspapers to do an article on it and media outlets. It's almost impossible. No one's interested. So I just want to say that if anybody is aware of World Right to Know Day coming up, to pitch your local, just let people know that adopted people are massively affected by this right to know. And in terms of future work, I have a book coming out soon, which is an edited version of my PhD thesis on adoption structures and systems. So I will, it'll be all over my socials when we get to that stage. I am calling it Bastards, in case anyone's offended by that. That's not my thesis name as I was writing it, but it's called Bastards, Adoption and the Manufacture of Identity.
Was that September 28th? Is that what you said, Barbara?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. We had someone who had asked that question. Lynelle.
Thanks for having me. The only thing I guess I'd like to say to people is just encourage you to get involved when and where you're ready. And I've put in the chat just if you wanted to reach out to me at some point. I'm more than happy to be a sounding board, or someone who can offer some suggestions. So yeah, happy to be contacted. Thanks for having me.
I want to say thank you too for having me, Amanda, Jude. Thank you. I want to second what Barbara said about the right to know. I know anytime I have a chance to talk to anyone, I talk about original birth certificates because I think it's just in the United States, it's just not well known by the general population that adoptees don't, the majority of adoptees don't have access to a government document. It's really mind blowing to people when they find that out. And I went on vacation in March and was on a train down the coast and got into a really nice conversation with a young couple, and it started out about cemeteries, it went to DNA, and it ended up in original birth certificates for adoptees. And so I tell anyone I possibly can about original birth certificates. So I say, start somewhere, and I found that that's the easiest place to start for me in the United States.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Greg, amazing MC. He has that that speaking power that I lack, which is great, right? So it makes a team. And I'm so glad for everybody who came and gave your time and advocacy, like Lynelle said, just self-care too. I know this from experience. Just make sure to make sure fill your cup up, put your oxygen mask on. Oh, Jude.
Thank you. Yes, and Fireside does have, and a lot of people follow Fireside's support group page, and a lot of adoptees, but we do have a constellation and legislation page, which is for allies, which is for adoptive parents, birth parents, and adoptees. And we will be posting advocacy type things there. So if you're interested in advocacy, we'll be posting these meetings and other things in the coming days. Please follow that page on Facebook so that you can stay informed. I'm just really thankful for everybody that came. We will be sending an email out with this video and some other resources. Thank you.
Woohoo. I like that. Jude is, I like it. Yeah, that's true. And it's so important advocacy. And I agree with Lynelle, like start with yourself. Start with yourself, because if we're triggered by everything, it's going to be really hard to be in the advocacy space, because let me tell you, no one can trigger you like a fellow, put in the blank, adoptee, birth parent, fellow, adoptive parent, like whomever, But yeah, and because if it's eating you alive, that's not good either, Just got to make sure to take care of you, have those friends. Like Gondo was saying, like not everybody is, find those people who you can work with, who can, you fill their cup, they fill your cup, you can cry with, laugh with, because this is a hard space to be in, y'all. Like find those people you can truly be you with. Like that's so I've found that's my best advice like I can give you guys. Is just people that you can be you, even if it's just a couple. Just that you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be whatever it is you feel like you have to be. You can just say, "Hey, it's been a day." I felt like I was losing today, but there's always another day. There's a I don't know, but there's a poem about the boy who throws the starfish in the sea, or sometimes it's a clam. And somebody asks, "Why do you do this?" They always come back and you're not making a difference. There's so many. And he picks up another and throws. He's like, "Well, I made a difference for that one." So that's to me, that's the heart of advocacy. Even if that one is you, especially if that one is you. So thank you, everybody. And Greg, did you want to say anything? I want to give you a chance.
I wanted to thank all of our speakers, Barbara, Lynelle, Andrea, to thank you, and Jude. Amanda is our very modest founder of Fireside Adoptees, which is a tremendous group. And thank you for putting together an event like this, and for everybody who came to listen to our guests and support and the lively conversation and the chat and the questions. It was really an honor to be in this capacity. Please look for other content we have on the Fireside Adoptees YouTube channel. Also, we do have a number of videos up there, probably close to 60 videos now, and well, all kinds of things. But we look forward to adding really important contributions like that to the list of things we've done. So for everybody, I'm going to stop the recording. We've been going about an hour and 45 minutes. Wonderful engagement. Appreciate everybody hanging in, and look forward to the next time we can all meet together. So I'll stop the recording, and I wish you all well and hope to see you again soon in Fireside Constellation.